Hello, BookTube. I've got some mail for you today on a very overcast Saturday. Yesterday's almost comically bright blue sky, not a single hint of any obscurance or haze or fog, much less cloud. That is long gone. Today is heavily clouded. It almost makes me believe what all the forecasts and all the data that I'm seeing are saying, which is that my area of the country is in for days of rain. I don't believe that. I think what will probably happen is that we'll get a little bit of rain tonight, and then the forecast will change and there won't be any rain after that. Days of rain would be a little bit much, but uh, we've got a little bit of mail, some periodicals, and a couple of boxes. And where my guard is up here because yesterday's mail haul almost went into Rantville. Almost did. Now, we turned it around, and the way that I turned it around led to a few of you to email me with the problem that I'm talking about, for those of you who haven't been keeping up with this deathless story, is that I had a few mail hauls that either the book or the publicity sheet sent me into a 40-minute rant that I couldn't use, so I had to delete the video. And that's a waste of time. Uh, and the solution that was come up with is that maybe we should have a code word. That if I'm running into trouble with a pub sheet or a book, instead I stop in my tracks and use a code word, a code phrase, something like food for thought, and then just abruptly move on so that I cut the thing off at the pass. And I tried that on a couple of subsequent videos, and I still ranted. And knowing that, a couple of you emailed yesterday and this morning and said that maybe the tactic, instead of a code word, maybe the tactic should be that when I start to run into trouble, I just shift into a rant about Amazon's The Rings of Power. Since I have many such rants ready to hand. But we're going to hope for no rants at all this time around. And the periodicals certainly pleased. Like, for instance, Analog, which has not pleased me in a long time. I got the new issue. This is fantastic. There are so many good stories in here. There's a lot of flash fiction in here, which is not a story at all. It's a story idea. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of flash fiction here, and quite a few of the short stories in here were only a few pages long. But the long stories in here were terrific, including the cover story, which is very convincingly about totally non-human creatures, very convincingly imagined non-human creatures. There's also a really good story here. I want to name it just in case you have Analog. Let's see. Well, the title doesn't help me at all. Let's move to the story itself, which is about a character. Yeah, The Last Romantic on the Belle-Époque by M.L. Clark. Don't think I know M.L. Clark, but that was a terrific story. Just terrific. No fat on it at all. No assumption that it has your attention at all. But a lot of the stories in this issue were like it. But as good as those stories were, the best thing in this issue by far was nonfiction. And it was amazing. This is an amazing piece. Analog does this. They do fiction, but they also do science fact as well. And this is a piece by Duncan Lunan on Oumuamua. On the object Oumuamua. That was the name that was given it by the Hawaiian telescope that discovered it. That's an artist's conception of what it may or may not look like. We don't know because it's moving extremely fast. So, but it has weird characteristics that have led to all sorts of speculation about what it actually is. It is the very first extra solar system object that we have ever actually identified. It came in out of the ecliptic of the solar system, and scientists in the article are trying to figure out what this thing is. It came into our solar system and then is now exiting our solar system and will be gone in the 2030s, be out of the solar system in the 2030s. And there's all sorts of divided opinion about what Oumuamua is. It isn't acting like a normal object. It isn't acting like a natural object at all, which has led at least one astronomer at Harvard to say that it isn't a natural object, that it is an extraterrestrial artifact. And that is the best explanation for all the weird things about it. And I have to say, this article goes over all the theories and counter theories. And who's the author's name again? I've forgotten it already. Duncan was his first name. Duncan Lunan. I kind of liked the territoriality of Duncan Lunan because he's writing for Analog. Of course, you know what he's going to be rooting for. He's not going to deny science to root for it, but you know what explanation he's going to be rooting for, and he does. He does all throughout. He does not remove the subject of extraterrestrial manufacture, not just extra-solar system origin. He does not remove that possibility. There's no way to remove it, especially since a lot, as far as I can tell from this article and the bits that I've read elsewhere, a lot of the countervailing theories as to why Oumuamua would be so odd don't make any sense. They don't make any sense. Saying that this is the blasted off sheath of solid nitrogen that from, say, a part of Pluto or something orbiting Pluto doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Not only would such a thing, this thing is very thin. Whatever it is, it's very thin. That's led some people to say that it's probably a solar sail. It doesn't make sense that a cataclysm that could blast such a thing off the surface of a planet would leave it intact if it's that thin. And none of that explains the speed, the sheer speed of the thing, and the fact that it has no exhaust. It has no trail like a comet or an asteroid. It seems to be controlled in its flight. Scientists in this article and elsewhere have been positing, well, as it leaves the solar system, as it gets away from the sun, the superheated gas pockets that might have happened because of its proximity to the sun may be, exhaling. That may be the reason for the acceleration. Doesn't seem like enough of a reason for this much acceleration, and that would also leave a trace, and there aren't any traces. It was absolutely fascinating. I mean, how could I not, right? You've got a magazine full of, this time around anyway, very good science fiction. Very good, grounded, character-driven science fiction. But you've got an article at the same time talking about an actual object, about an object that entered our solar system coming almost straight down. So it doesn't seem to me that it came from anywhere in our solar system. It probably came from a nearby star. Well, what is it? And why is it acting so strange if it came from a nearby star? And as if to underscore how strange Oumuamua is, a new comet, an ordinary comet, if you can say such a thing, was discovered that is acting quite ordinary, quite normal, just as expected. How could an article about such a thing not be the most fascinating thing in this magazine, despite the best intentions of all the stories involved? How could it not be? That was the highlight of the issue for me, but I'm happy to report that the stories were also good. Then we got the London Review of Books, and for the second time, here, I want to make sure I credit this, John McNaught. For the second time, actually it's not the second time, there have been many instances, but this is the second time that it's caught my attention. For the second time, John McNaught has provided an absolutely beautiful cover to the latest issue of the London Review of Books. That is just an absolutely gorgeous cover. Doesn't have anything literary about it. It isn't slangy or slapdashy or pastiche or intentionally ugly. It's just a beautiful cover. I hope they keep this guy in harness for the next 50 years if he keeps producing public covers like this. I showed you the last one that he did that was wonderful. And this issue had a lot of good stuff in it. There was an article in here. I want to see if I can get to it. Maybe I can find it in the table of contents. There were a lot of really good things in here. Like, for instance, there was a book called Book Madness by Denise Gigante about book collecting. It's reviewed here by the one and only Anthony Grafton, and he does a fantastic job. Just fantastic. His review is so personal. It's just so full of his personal reminiscences. This is an old man of letters, an old style book man. And like his opening, you couldn't, someone just assigned to review this couldn't produce a Trumpets and Timpani opening like this. New York was a great book town in the 1960s. You could buy new books in English at the elegant Scribner shop on Fifth Avenue, new books in French at the Libraire de France or Rizzoli, and old books in German at St. Mary Rosenberg's austere, packed shop on Broadway, where neither I nor another obsessive friend could afford a $100 for a first edition of a Winkelmann's History of Ancient Art. You could pick up New Directions Poets in the Village, Hebrew Sepharim in Brooklyn, and German magazines in Yorkville. If you wanted rarities, you could browse the dusty, chaotic second-hand bookshops on 4th Avenue and Broadway. At the dustiest and wildest of them all, Dauber and Pine on 5th, one of the owners sold me a 17th century Latin book on Druids that I couldn't afford at half price. Rainy day special, he exclaimed. Higher-end bookshops offered Incunabula and Aldine's first editions of Gibbon and Austen to discriminating buyers who had real money. It just goes on like that. He does a good job reviewing the book, but you definitely know you're in the presence of someone who knows the subject, which is terrific. But the thing that really got my attention here, Miranda Carter does a long and wonderful review of the new Everyman's Library, I think it is, volume of Mary Renault, The King Must Die and The Bull from the Sea, her 2 books about Theseus, her 2 novels about Theseus. And Miranda Carter does a fantastic job of both talking about Mary Renault's life, which is fascinating, talking about the books themselves, and talking about the deeper meaning of both combined. It's just fantastic. It actually made me tempted. I do not have that Everyman Library edition, and I would like it. I would very much like that Everyman Library edition. It has an introduction by Daniel Mendelsohn, and it has the 2 novels that I have separately as battered old mass market paperbacks. Seriously tempted to reach out to Everyman and see, but the problem is that volume came out in the U.S. in 2022, and I don't think that they would care to send it so long after the fact. I mean, it's part of backstock now in bookstores. The copies that haven't been returned. No, I would have to buy it. I doubt that I will see it at the Brattle. Possible, but I doubt it. It's very tempting. Very, very tempting. There was also just one other thing here. There was a fantastic piece by Toril Moy. Who is Toril Moy? Teaches literature and philosophy at Duke. I don't know that name. But Toril Moy does a piece about The Easy Life in a new translation. The Easy Life by Marguerite Duras. And it's incredible. It's everything you want a long LRB piece about a book to be. Thought-provoking, challenging, enthusiastic, and also guaranteed to make you want to read the book, whether it's in this or in the French. Guaranteed to make you want to read it. The only, I think, unconsciously funny thing in here was, where was it here? Tom Johnson reviews a book by David Cressy called Shipwrecks and the Bounty of the Sea. And Tom Johnson relates stories from Cressy's book about people who waited, wreckers who waited for ships to wreck on their shore so that they could take everything. Because according to law, you were allowed, it was salvage. You were allowed to take it. It didn't matter if it was somebody else's property. If it washes up on shore, it's yours. And at one point in the review, Tom Johnson says, well, I doubt there was any malice involved. These people intentionally lured ships to their wreck so that they could profit. Of course there was malice involved. It was an industry. And there was Alan Blinder wrote a book called A Fiscal and Monetary History of the United States. It's reviewed by Jeff Mann, but I really wanted it to be reviewed by David Murphy. I think he could have made sense for it. I read the review, and the whole time I was thinking, this doesn't make any sense to me at all, but I bet it would make sense to David Murphy. But anyway. And then the final periodical, before we get to the boxes, was Architectural Digest. Is it time, in other words, for Donoghue Does Decor? we occasionally have this little indulgence, this sinful indulgence on this channel, where I will talk about an interior design magazine, because for some reason I get them. And this one, oh my. This one has the usual combinations that we always see of psychopathy and derangement and virtue signaling and whatnot. But it also has something in it that really, really hit home. I mean, big time for me. We have the first half of the magazine is always high profile, very expensive full color ads for one thing or another. A home buying service, home decorating firms that will come in and make your perfectly nice home into one of the atrocities that you would see in Architectural Digest. Things like that. That's the first half of the magazine, is little bits and pieces, articles, and also advertisements like that, where you will get, like, if you wanted to invite burglars into your home by changing your walls into windows, you would call these people, and I guess you get a complimentary links. I guess you do. I don't know. Not sure what it's doing there, except for spraying the windows. There was one ad in this section of the magazine that struck me. I don't know exactly what this ad is selling, but I'd like to know. Anyway, then we move on to the houses themselves. And the very first one, the first thing that we get to in the back half of the magazine when we profile houses and homes was the bullseye for me. A couple that renovated and are living in a Venetian palazzo. Oh. The article refers to this as the where have we got here? As the Palazzo Justinian Lolin. But it's the Palazzo Miani. I mean, I recognize it. Maybe it just goes by many names, or maybe they decided to call it that, or maybe the magazine did. But this couple moved into a Venetian palazzo on the Grand Canal and renovated it. There is the couple. And they just decided to make this a living space. And there are aspects of it that really work, and there are aspects of it that don't. There is the palazzo from the water. But we also get a view, very intriguing. You don't often see this, even in books devoted to Venice. We also get a view of the entrance, the actual entrance. If you're not coming in from the water, you're going to want to walk down a little brief alley, and then a turn, and then another brief alley, and then you get to the door of the house. But first you get to a pointer. Ooh, sweet, sweet, sweet. I used to have one of those. But this palazzo is mouthwatering. Absolutely mouthwatering. There are parts of it that are horrible, like the Vampire Lestat's bedroom. Why would you want to sleep in such a room? Why would you even want to enter such a room? but also stuff that is wonderful. Here, let me get an example. I think the bathroom in this case, yes. Look at this Marvel walk-in shower. Oh, my God. Oh, I'd never leave. I'd just put a bookcase of waterproof books in there, and I'd never leave. Then we move on to... where is this monstrosity? Peru. This is in Lima. And there was a detail in here that I wanted to point to that was, it's got a really nice little pool with steps going down there, not for laps or anything, but very much to lounge around in. And I like how the pool is arranged so that parts of it are in shade pretty much all day long. That's a very nice touch. Not a lot of pools do that. Not a lot of pools can do that. This place seems to be put a high value on greenery. It's one of those living wall displays that we saw the last time. But there was... Okay, then we moved to Lebanon, to a totally green house in Lebanon that also accepted the services of that firm that provided the owners with a lynx. You get a free lynx, and that's got to be compensation because you're going to lose everything that you own because they're going to remove your walls and put in windows that are also doors. So that's great. So if I'm walking by and I kind of want that $15 million painting that you've got on your wall, it's not going to be hard for me to get it. I'm going to be able to see it. I'm going to be able to watch and see when you're home and when you're not. I'm going to be able to walk in and take it. So I probably will. But we move on to the Cotswolds, to a little house, not actually little, it's a gigantic pile that is renovated in the English countryside, and it is pretty mouthwatering. I mean, that's a view from the back porch to a little pool and the acreage beyond. There is a view from the back garden. That is pretty nice. That is pretty nice. And I have to say, the house isn't a monstrosity either. There are some stubborn, bad decisions. If you have a house like this, you do not want Austin Powers furniture. You don't want this. You want actual furniture. You don't want weird furniture. You want actual furniture. And also, the ironclad habit in Architectural Digest and other design magazines of facing away from the window, facing away from the door. Anywhere in this room, literally anywhere. We're not talking about the horrible shit chairs. The chairs are ridiculous on their own. You can't get into them and you can't get out of them. They are designed to break. If Deb or I sits in them, which is the whole yardstick that you want to use, does your room invite me and Deb to overstay our welcome? Does your chair invite me and Deb to sit in it and never leave? That might be a nightmare for you as a host, but it's a win for you as a designer. That is just a disaster. But even if you get rid of the chairs or you replace them with something a human could sit in, this should get your back to the outside world. What a waste. What an absolute waste. Same thing with this library. It's a rare example of a library in Architectural Digest, but the furniture is on top of it. The furniture is blocking a lot of it, including who puts a potted plant on a couch, on a divan like this? Who does that? That's not sitting on a shelf. That's on this thing. Instead of you being on it, looking at the books, the plant is on there. Honestly, I ask you. But I seem to remember there were good moments in this house as well. Well, there is a little good moment. Also, a very pretty bathroom there. And a kind of nice little informal dining room here. It's a little bit on the cramped side. I would get rid of the couches. So you can walk around there, so you can walk around the table without stumbling over things. But I thought there was something. Oh yes, the solarium. Oh my! Almost makes up for the chairs facing into the room and away from the imagine that being where you read. Oh, that would be incredible. So that was Architectural Digest. Not entirely a bust, although heartbreaking for me to see that palazzo. To see that couple renovating a palazzo. That is something. But now we have boxes. So we'll see what we have here. We'll see if we can stay out of trouble just long enough to do these boxes. I'm trying to figure out, is this the day is very dodgy lighting. It's a very stormy looking day. It's not actually storming, but it's cloudy, and it's not serene clouds. They're clouds that seem to have a modus operandi. And it's causing really dodgy light. I'm trying to figure out, is that the dodgy light making me look like I have an Oliver Twist smudge on my cheek, or do I actually have an Oliver Twist smudge on my teeth? I don't know. Let's move on. Let's just see what this first one is and try to stay out of trouble. We will try to stay out of trouble. Oh, okay, no trouble here. Oh, look at the size of this thing. All right, this comes out in August. I don't know that I'm going to be able to wait. This is a new novel by Paul Murray, the author of Skippy Dies, who I think a lot of you probably read. This is The Bee Sting. This is his new book. Look at the size of this thing. The arrival of a new Paul Murray novel always comes with a bit of suspense. His symphonic, scathingly funny epics of contemporary Ireland take years to build, and when a new one is finally here, a fan can't help but wonder whether he will again clear the high bar set by his earlier works. Books with feel like magic tricks and seem to inspire a unique kind of passion in their readers. That is true. Murray is returning 8 years after The Mark and The Void, 13 years after the Booker-nominated Skippy Dies, with a magnum opus. I don't think I have a copy of The Mark and The Void. I guess I'll have to go to Book Depository and... Oh. Let's just move on. This book draws on territory that will be familiar to readers of Murray's previous books. Financial folly, teenage friendships, the internet, the recession, video games, Irish folklore. But it also pushes past them in new directions. Its characters are mostly a little older, and its emotional register is a little darker. It's a story written from the different world that the decades since the Skippy has wrought, where climate disaster, extreme politics, and a sense of impending calamity have come to the fore. And yet, for all that, The Bee Sting is somehow impossibly even funnier, more soulful, and bigger-hearted than its predecessors. Donna Tartt has called Paul Murray one of her favorite two writers of the 21st century, and this novel has something of the Goldfinch's Dickensian intricacy and enthralling storytelling. But as always, there is a humor and exuberance and inventiveness here that is entirely Murray's. All right, well, do we have anything about the book? Or are you just going to continue to propose marriage? The galley you hold in your hands could be a doorstopper, a dumbbell, or a weapon in a pinch. Within you'll meet a troubled but unforgettable family. Cass, a precocious teenager getting in with the wrong crowd, her brother PJ, lonely and far too much online, their father, debt-laden Dickie, who finds refuge in his half-built apocalypse bunker, Dickie's magnetic wife Imelda, whose pathological shopping addiction is tied to troubled past, and a tiny wound from a cute little insect that leads to a devastating, unpredictable, and riotous consequences. Okay. Well, I'm on board anyway. Absolutely. I'm on board anyway with this author. So, but I didn't know this was this big. That's just fantastic. So we're off to a fine start. August, The Bee Sting, the new Paul Murray novel. Then we'll move on to this next one, and then we'll be in the theater. We'll be done. Without any kind of rant, no trouble, no impending cancellation, no nothing like that. Which is... this is a finished copy of something. Boxes have not behaved well. They are, oh God. On top of that, it's an invoice. I don't want an invoice. What have we got here? Okay, no pub sheet. We have Empire Incorporated, the corporations that built British colonialism, by Philip J. Stern. Empire Incorporated. So this be the East India Company? Maybe, among many others? Let's see. We don't have this sheet, so we'll just read it as if you found this in a bookstore. Across 4 centuries, from Ireland to India, the Americas to Africa and Australia, British colonialism was above all the business of corporations. Corporations conceived, promoted, financed, and governed overseas expansion, making claims over territory and peoples while ensuring that British and colonial society were invested, quite literally, in their ventures. Colonial companies were also relentlessly controversial, frequently in debt, and prone to failure. The corporation was well suited to overseas expansion not because it was an inevitable juggernaut, but because, like empire itself, it was an elusive contradiction, public and private, person and society, subordinate and autonomous, centralized and diffuse, immortal and precarious, national and cosmopolitan, a legal fiction with very real power. Tell me about it. According to the Supreme Court, corporations are people in America. They can, I guess, adopt children. They can drive a car. Breaking from traditional histories in which corporations take a supporting role by doing the dirty work of sovereign states in exchange for commercial monopolies, the author argues that corporations took the lead in global expansion and administration. Whether in the 16th century Ireland and North America or the Falklands in the early 1980s, corporations were key players. And this book makes clear venture colonialism did not cease with the end of empire. Venture colonialism. I love that. Oh, that is great. Its legacies continue to raise questions about corporate power that are just as relevant today as they were 400 years ago. Okay, I'm on board. I'm assuming that this is, who is this? The Belknap Press of Harvard University Press. I'm assuming this is out already. I'm assuming this is an April release. Do we dare to read about the author? History of British Empire and the author of the award-winning book, The Company State. Well, that was painless. Okay, great. Wow, all right. So, a big work of history. Finished copy, so this is probably soon. I'll have to check the date on it. I'm intrigued. These might both be TBR picks for tonight. So we have a big, slightly revisionist history of British colonialism, and the new Paul Murray, a gigantic new novel from Paul Murray. So, not bad mail at all. Very good, very good. That ought to do it. I don't think there'll be any mail tomorrow, but I'll wrap. This has gone on long enough anyway, so I'll wrap this up, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.